ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי אורי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי אורי שבת.
Shabbat Shalom and Boker Tov. Welcome. My name is, as always, Philip Rice. They call me Rabbi Flip. I'm here in the library of Congregation Micah, welcoming you to BLT. That is, inviting you to have a BLT with the rabbi. That's Bagels, Love, and Torah on this Parashat Tzav, this weekend where we study, along with Jews worldwide, the Torah portion in the book of Leviticus. Before I introduce the Torah portion, we always like to do what I refer to often as brain candy, share a little bit of words of wisdom. And so I like to have a text I pull out, a little something to think about to get our brains warmed up before we approach the sacred text of Torah. And before we do that, we always like to begin with a blessing, so we'll get started. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise and thank that power in the universe which commands us to busy ourselves with sacred words of meaning. Anyway, we jump right in with a piece called Soul Clocks by, one of my favorites, Rabbi David Wolpe, who writes, Jewish events are notorious for starting late. I know you can watch this at any time. The clock seems to move all too swiftly for this people whose span is measured not in minutes, but in millennia. So we are leisurely about beginnings. The Zionist leader Nachum Goldman once said, I tried my whole life to come late to a Jewish meeting, and I never succeeded. Strangely, however, Jewish law depends on precision in the measurement of time. Sabbaths and holidays have specific starting times. Ritual observances such as mourning have definite time-bound cycles. We seem caught between the rigor of ritual and the languor of social occasions. Perhaps each clock counterbalances the other. Centuries of wandering do not always permit a fixed and insistent attitude towards time. Flexibility and patience are virtues cultivated by our uneasy history. And still, we did not allow tribulation to override obligation. For all the uncertainty in the world, there was certainty in our souls. Our spiritual clocks remain fine-tuned, insistent on the rhythms of our devotion. We've also made allowances for the unpredictability of circumstances. In other words, he writes, often it's a matter of finding parking. Well, parking was not a trouble when I came into the building today. I am alone in it. And there is continued uncertainty in the world. But there can be certainty in here that our traditions will continue. So I ask, what is it that brings a certain certainty to your soul? Where do you find strength? I hope we do not finish the book of Leviticus before we're together again. We'll finish the whole book. We'll say, Hazak, Hazak, Vanit Hazek, be strong, and we will be strengthened. Because I miss your presence, those who come regularly and study these words with the community. And those who are now watching, that's another good way to join us. We have chosen not to do this virtually in terms of interactive, just so we can appeal to multiple platforms. During this time of social isolation, we don't want you to feel isolated. So there are ways to connect, and some of them, are certainly through our sacred scriptures. I wanted to share another piece from the same book. It says, the rabbis teach that the Torah is from God, And yet, the most studied rabbinic text, Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our ancestors, begins with the words, Moshe kibel Torah mi-Sinai. Moses received the Torah from Sinai. So what's the difference? The usual interpretation is that Sinai is kind of a spiritual sort of synecdoche. It means from God. And the mountain is a metaphor. But the great medieval commentator, Abravanel, proposes another answer. Had Moses not spent 40 days and nights alone on Sinai, he would not have been able to receive the Torah. The time spent alone in prayer, in meditation, quarantined, prepared him for the experience of encountering God. The story is told of one Hasidic master whose child used to spend time alone in the forest. Concerned and curious, one day the rabbi pulled his boy aside and he sort of asked him what he was doing. I go to the forest to find God, replied his son. Well, that's wonderful, said the father. But you know that God is everywhere. Yes, answered the boy. I know that God is, but I'm not. There are certain places and times in our lives when we can find God. Moses had to have Sinai. The boy needed the forest. The challenge is to find our place and cherish it. And I would add now, my Rashi is the challenge is to find your place in this situation, in whatever space you currently occupy. To go back to that certainty of soul and to locate what it is that you need during this time. It's called finding your own place. So, that's just the introduction. It's time really to get started, and what I wanted to do next was to introduce the Torah portion with something that one of my teachers, one of my mentors, Rabbi Daniel Weiner of Seattle, Washington, has taught me about Tzav, and that is where the elite seek the meat. Because the truth is that little distinguishes this Torah portion this week, Tzav, from last week's Torah portion. They're both in the book of Leviticus, and the majority of the information throughout the text is a meticulously described overview of the sacrificial cult and of ancient Judaism. Years ago, Shockin published an edition of the text, the Hebrew Scriptures, that touted to be the most relevant to the modern person. The book of Leviticus was pared down, I think, to one paragraph. Through slicing and dicing of the temple ritual and the agrarian lives of our ancestors, even though they seem to bear little resemblance of our contemporary style of worship, there is still inspiration in these practices, and they're beyond sort of just an anthropological interest. I think I've mentioned before the Hebrew word for sacrifice or offering is korban, deriving from the root meaning to draw near, to be close. The ancient Jews drew near to the temple, and by extension, to God. And they did that when they offered korbanot, sacrifices. Worship today also provides opportunities to approach the divine, to approach holiness, to seek transcendence. But for ancient and modern Jews, prayer and presence in a worship service are about something more. When the Israelites offered their animals and crops as a gift of self, they were consciously supporting the community at large. The God of Israel did not require the material tribute that pagan gods demanded. The point of the sacrifice was not to change something in God, but to transform the individual, the community. Participation in today's synagogue, in worship, in education, in acts of tikkun olam. Those are the things that bind us as a community. In essence, our needs, our ideals are played out this way. It is quintessentially Jewish. It's a Jewish value to seek and find God through our encounter with others. And that's what makes this time so particularly difficult. So we will delve in deeper to the text, but from the balcony. The ancient words and the modes of our portion speak in clear, strong, and resonant tones. But they've got to find their way into your soul. So, where to begin? I like to begin with story. I think a lot of people know that about me. The book Leviticus is sort of it's a how-to text for the priestly castes of Israel. And the assumption is that Judaism is and forever will be a religion of animal sacrifice. And we know, of course, this is not the case. The question we must deal with here is, what is the nature of Judaism based on acts when those acts are no longer done, no longer performed? So, let me just read the text a little bit, and what I'm going to do now is read some text, parse it out, and give you some, like I mentioned, a davar acher, some different opinions on different aspects of the text. So, Vayadaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moses, saying, Tzav et Aharon, command Aaron, ve'et banav, and his children, lemor, his sons, saying, Zot Torah Olah. This is the Torah of the Olah, the whole burnt offering. He ha'olah al mokdah. It shall remain on the altar, this burnt offering, where it is burned, kol halayla, all of the night, al hamizbeach al kol halayla, ad haboker, until morning, the esh, and the fire, hamizbeach, of the fire of the altar, tukad bo, shall be sort of kept going on it. And what does that mean? It means a burnt offering, basically, was supposed to be kept on the altar until the end, until it was completely consumed. So, a student once asked his Rebbe, we pray for the return of sacrifice daily. If we ever restored the temple, do you envision a Judaism about animal sacrifice? And the Rebbe replied, worship styles reflect the level of understanding of the people that are doing them. Animal sacrifice was appropriate for a time in our past, but I do not think we should return to it now. It would be like a person who has learned to read Shakespeare, abandoning Hamlet in favor of a first-grade reader. We have moved beyond animal sacrifice to the much higher service of the heart. Sacrifice, ego, and arrogance, not cattle and sheep. So, the sacrifices mentioned here have already been mentioned. Previously, the emphasis was on the person bringing the sacrifice. Here, it's on the priest performing the sacrifice. What role do you think priests played in the life of the ancient Hebrews? What social, psychological, and spiritual role did they provide? And what might be an equivalent to priests in our secular society today? These are what we call the peshat, the simple questions we begin to ask as we try to delve a little deeper into the text. If you recall, I like to get to paradise. That's pardes, that's peshat, that's the simple meaning. And then usually there is a remez, a clue that something else is going on. The Gemara says, all who occupy themselves in Torah have no need for the burnt offering, the meal offering, the sin offering, nor for the guilt offering. Does the study of Torah place the need for sacrifice? And if so, how? Paradise, Peshat, Remez, the clue. Then there's the drash, there's the interpretation. And here the Gemara suggests that just reading about the sacrifice is enough to fulfill the command to sacrifice. This makes the acts of Torah symbolic rather than real. This transforms the Torah from mitzvot to metaphor. It's enough that you read about kindness, or is it enough that you read about kindness and not perform kind deeds? Is it enough that you read about valor and not live with valor? The Talmud is trying to teach us something. The question is what? The secret meaning, paradise. Only the divine knows. We continue. Verse 3. I should have said in the beginning, we're in chapter 6 of the book of Leviticus. I'm continuing with verse 3. I'll just go in English. It says, the priest shall dress in linen raiment, with linen breeches next to his body, and he shall take up the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering on the altar and place them beside the altar. He shall then take off his vestments and put on other vestments, and carry the ashes outside the camp to a clean place. The fire on the altar shall be kept burning, not to go out. Every morning the priest shall feed wood to it, lay out the burnt offering on it, and turn it into smoke, the fat parts of the offering of the well-being. A perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar, not to go out. So, I got a drash on that too. I got an interpretation of the text. It comes from a Rabbi Schumann, who writes, there is a holiness even in drudgery. When we visualize things that are holy, we often look to the big, beautifully choreographed wedding, or the bar mitzvah, or the confirmation ceremony. We conjure up sort of the high holy day service with its choir, accompanied by a cantor's dramatic sort of chanting, and rich, polished performances of instruments, and we're filled with awe. Thus it's called the days of awe, right? A sense of mysterium tremendum, and the memory of experiences that seem to fill us high above the ordinary. It's easy to forget, however, that each of those moments requires monumental effort and painstaking attention to detail behind the scenes. The wedding requires hours of preparation with respect to the dress and the tuxedo and the floral arrangements and the musical selections and the composition of the wedding party and the invitations and the design and making of the chuppah, the counseling sessions with the rabbis and the content of the ketubah and those all-important arrangements with the caterer. And look, the bar mitzvah too demands years of preparation, mastery of some Hebrew reading and cantillation chanting, and detailed knowledge of the Shabbat morning service, and careful study of what is being chanted so that our young people can interpret it, and preparing those short drashot, those short sermons, and selecting to be called up and know the blessing for the aliyah, and then there's the parental words of praise that they offer, choreographing a little bit. The kids always like, do I go left or right with the hakafah as I'm carrying the Torah? And look, sometimes there's some traffic on the bima. So similar care is taken with flowers and robes and speeches and Torah readings and projects. Effortless high holy day services require hours of choir rehearsals and rabbinic sermon agony a bevy of phone calls and letters and emails and pulpit honors and lesson plans for children's and shofar blowing and breadcrumbs and details and memorial books for Yizkor and maddening amount of details of parts and maintaining contact with everybody involved. And this is how it was for the ancient priests. While the sacrificial rituals, specifically of ordination we read of, were filled with pomp and drama behind the scenes, I think priests probably had to contend with a variety of mundane and repetitious tasks, including removing ashes from the altar and stoking the perpetual fire. And these duties were not entrusted to other Levites or lay people. They were inherent responsibility of the priesthood. Moreover, the work often involved a good deal of drudgery, as well as, we just read, a change of clothing. Makes you think about all the hospital workers who come and go from their homes. Sacred work. I mean, the ashes, too, were of the olah. They were of the whole burnt offering we read of already. A remnant of the sacred interface with God and Israel. And it required special attire, special handling, and burial in a makom tahor, a ritually pure place. Similarly, feeding the fire prior to placement of the olah upon the altar and stocking the perpetual fire were arduous. They were messy tasks. And yet here too the priests were dealing with sacred objects, integral not only to the sacrificial rituals, but also to the very function of the Mishkan as divinely ordained sacred space. For Reformed Jews today, the recognition of sacred drudgery holds great significance, particularly when we think of the Jewish home. Anyone who has put together a Passover Seder like we're about to knows it can be an arduous task. Preparing a kitchen and organizing and shopping and vacuuming and cleaning and contending with the myriad of details that the Seder can prove, well, frankly, overwhelming. Especially in our community where there's a very large interfaith population. Not everyone grew up with those memories or learning how to do it. So, the thing is, the halakhic instructions are that we do not get, quote, hired help to do it, to engage in this process. So as with Shabbat, these preparations help connect us more deeply, more completely to the meaning of a chag, of a holiday, and the rituals of the kitchen or the dining room, the table. They make our homes, and we need them desperately to be at this holy season, a mikdash ma'at, a miniature sanctuary. The same principle really applies to any mitzvah, be it a ritual, ethical, or communal. When we're willing to perform it fully, even when it requires a considerable amount of drudgery and schlepping, we create a sacred space that permits God really to dwell among us. Isn't that our task? So we chew on that for a few moments, and then I provide a devar acher, another opinion. All right, devar acher, another opinion. I'm reading now from Leviticus chapter 6, verse 17. I'm going to read just verses 17 and 18, and then I'm going to read verse 7, 1, the first line of the next chapter. It goes like this. God spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el Aharon, speak to Aaron, ve'el banav, and to his sons, Lemor, saying, Zot Torah tachatat. This is the Torah of the sin offering. Bimkom asher tishachet ha'olah, tishachet chachatat, lifnei Adonai kodesh kadoshim hi. The sin offering is the ritual of the sin offering, the Torah as we called, shall be slaughtered before the Lord at the spot, in the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered. It is most holy. And then line 7:1 says, Zot Torah ha'asham. This is the Torah, the ritual of the guilt offering. Kodesh Kadashim hu. It is the most holy. Okay. So, let's see what we got here about... this is from Billy Dreskin, Rabbi Billy Dreskin. Studied with him many years back. He's pretty creative. Anyway, in December of 2005, a long time ago, Stanley Tukey Williams, co-founder of the Crips, the violent Los Angeles street gang, had been executed by lethal injection, paying the ultimate price for his violent past. During his years in prison, Williams had renounced gang violence, written children's books with anti-gang messages, and donated the book's earnings to anti-gang community groups. Questions surrounding Williams' execution and whether the governor of California ought to have granted clemency will linger. They do to this day, I'm sure. But what Tukey Williams did in his final years was good. He couldn't save his life, but steered himself away from his past and pointed others toward a better future. And those are holy acts. Holiness is a central concern of Jewish life. Kedoshim tehiyu, you shall be holy, God tells us. It's coming in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 2. We are not to become a holy, we are to become a holy people, Deuteronomy 26:19. We are to separate ourselves from that which is not holy, or not yet holy. We can certainly view works of expansive goodness, such as working in a soup kitchen, or lobbying to end genocide, or opening our hearts to someone who is lost or in pain. These are acts of kindness, of holiness. Judaism has always elevated tikkun olam, repair of the world, and gimlut chasadim, acts of love and kindness, to positions of primary importance in our religious lives. When we take the time, especially when such time is so difficult to find, to visit a friend at the hospital, which we can no longer do, or to stop someone whose car is broken down, not a lot of people are out on the road, or to even just place a phone call to our mom and dad, there's something we can do. These are holy acts. And if God takes pleasure in the offerings of our lives, these might very well be among God's favorites. But what about times when we stumble? What about the truth withheld, or the hand withdrawn, or the heart grown cold, or even in this case, the separation? Being human is a flawed venture. Few, if any, are those who haven't erred in exercising freedom of choice. We wander into selfishness. We attack with angry words. We become blinded by our pride or our ego. We even deny healthy and loving attention to our bodies and our souls. How far must we journey to restore these holy things at times like these? In some ways, we're being given a gift. This is the ritual of preparation, guilt offering. It is most holy. With one simple phrase, a sublime message is offered to us. If we have fallen, we need not remain forever in the dust. If our words or our actions have undermined God's creation, brought discomfort or pain to others or to ourselves, there's almost always a path that will bring us uplift, restoring at least some of life's beauty and wholeness from where it has been fractured. This is teshuvah, return, repentance. More than its atoning, as we so plentifully do on the high holidays, these are actual deeds that apply the much-needed balm to the wounds we have dispensed in our time. It's not easy to do. Reconnecting with a brother or a sister we haven't spoken with for years, admitting to or rectifying ways in which we've exploited others in order to succeed at work, or seeking professional help for a lingering physical or emotional condition. These are heroic acts. We may not receive a medal from anyone for performing such feats, but we certainly sleep better at night for having taken powerful, even if tiny, steps towards initiating positive change and recovery. There are deeds of purity and selflessness that we know to be holy. Then we consider ourselves very lucky when we are ready to be able to perform them. For the other 99% of our waking moments, we muster the hard-won courage to take on the truly formidable challenges of fixing what's gone wrong. We engage as Jews in acts of epic consequence. For us, that requires Samson-like determination. Bring them into being. And they are no less holy. Our ancestors envisioned a community in which the mechanism for return was enshrined in sacred rituals. An institutionalized, accessible path to get back home was offered to all. And with that path, they counseled wisely. Bring this offering, a contrite heart, and the gritty determination to do better, and the road to renewal will be open before you. Redemption will only come kicking and screaming. It will not likely take our hand with a smile. We're accustomed to living the circumstances that create the demand for teshuvah. But knowing how to address them and rising to meet that need may be separated by a gulf as vast and dispiriting as an unparted Red Sea. Raise the staff, however, like Moses. We can create miracles. That power never goes away. It may come as a surprise to learn that we carry it within us. It is nonetheless available, even if it is long unused. Tookie Williams' life is over and has been for some time. Our society decided he'd get no more chances. The question is, what about you and me? Are we worth saving? It is our stubborn Jewish faith that no life is beyond reclaim. Like Jacob, we may limp through our years with permanently torn bodies, but perhaps it's time to set our own feet upon the broken yet precious and eternally holy road that leads to forgiveness and repair. From Parashat Tzav, lesson number 2 of the day. Get ready for a third. Adavar Acher.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. אמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, Shalom Aleinu El Kol Yisrael.
All right. Devar Acher, another matter, is brought to us by Rabbi Saul Strasberg from Torah from Music City. Maybe you've read it already. He writes, the focus in this morning's parasha is not what you would expect it to be. In examining the laws of the sacrifices, the Torah gets stuck and spends time on very important detail of Trumat Hadashen and Hotza'at Hadashen, sweeping up the ashes from the altar from the previous day's sacrifices, and then later moving them outside the camp. And maybe this image of meticulously sweeping ashes somehow resonates with our own experiences prior to Pesach, given the extensive cleaning efforts required to get homes ready for the Chag, the holiday. Indeed, the extensive physical preparations for Pesach, like the Trumat Hadashen and the Hotza'at Hadashen, in the tabernacle and the temple, should be recognized as spiritually significant and warrant the full participation of the various members of the household. Because here we are, deep cleaning our homes, our cars, our offices, and the tasks can very quickly feel overbearing, not meaningful, mundane. And so the Torah comes along to teach us that even the most mundane actions, if accompanied by the right kavanah or intentions, are elevated. So true in this time when we're social distancing and stuck at home. In fact, sometimes having the right kavanah can transform the very act itself. Here's an example from the New York Times, New Year's magazine, dealing with the best new ideas or inventions in 2007. The title of the piece is Perceptions Matter, or as we say in our community, Kavanah Counts. It's by Christopher Shea. Simply by telling 44 hotel maids that what they did each day involved some serious exercise, the Harvard psychologist Ellen Langer and Alia J. Crum, a student, were apparently able to lower the women's blood pressure, shave pounds off their bodies, and improve their body fat, waist to hip ratios. Self-awareness, kavanah, it seems, was the woman's elliptical trainer. At the start of the study, Langer and Crum quizzed 84 maids at 7 carefully selected hotels about how much exercise they got. A third of the women said they got no exercise at all, while 2/3 said they did not work out regularly. Langer and Crum took several measures of the woman's basic fitness levels, which confirmed poor health of basically sedentary people. Then, just over half the women were told an unfamiliar truth. Cleaning 15 rooms daily, pushing vacuum cleaners, scrubbing tubs, pulling sheets, constitutes more than enough activity to meet the Surgeon General's recommendations of a half-hour of physical activity daily. The research even provided specifics. 15 minutes of scrubbing burns 60 calories, 15 minutes of vacuuming burns 50. The basic measure and the details were then posted in the maids' lounges in the hotels where the 44 women worked to serve as reminders, while a controlled group was left in the dark. A month later, Langer and Crum observed remarkable results. The average maid had lost over 2 pounds, while her blood pressure had dropped by 10 points. By all measures, the 44 women were significantly healthier. Yet there were no reported changes in behavior, only in mindset, with the vast majority of the women now considering themselves regular exercisers. Langer sees the study as a lesson in the importance of mindfulness and engagement, and I see this lesson as the importance of kavanah. If we realize what we are doing is holy and meaningful and spiritually significant, then what we are doing becomes more holy, meaningful, and spiritually significant. And so when my doctor asks me if I work out, I try to explain to him that davening 3 times a day, in addition to being an intellectual and spiritual exercise, is also physical. We shuckle back and forth, we sit down, we stand up. We sit down, we stand up, we sit down. Okay, we lift the Torah, we wrap the Torah 4 times a week. It all adds up in the mix. Rabbi Dov Linzer, however, takes the lessons of Trumat Hadashen, sweeping the ashes in a slightly different direction. He explains that coming to the temple in a certain sense was like going to Disney World. The idea that you were mesmerized by what you saw. Everything looked beautiful and perfect. So when the Torah teaches us about Terumat Hadashen, and you would occasionally see a Kohen wearing his janitorial outfit instead of his priestly garments, you would learn about the true nature of the job. we should always remember that there is so much that goes into the important things we have in life, like our homes, our synagogues, our schools. And sometimes it's important to peel back the curtain. Writes Rabbi Linzer, the thousands of details and the hundreds of man-hours required to get everything perfectly in place to make it all look easy and simple are somehow so easily forgotten. The blindness that extends to our interactions with our spouses. How often do we get upset when something is not exactly as it should be? Do we realize how much work it takes to keep a house in order? To remove the ashes? Taking out the garbage, vacuuming, doing the wash, putting everything in its place, keeping the house stocked with groceries, having meals ready at the right time, having the table set, having the dishes done, having the bills paid, interacting with the children's teachers, handling the extracurricular activities. Do we all see all of this? Or do we just get upset when something was forgotten to be done, not done to our liking? This also occurs in our appraisals of our modern-day Kohanim. When it comes to those who work for the community or serve others in the Jewish community, their pay rate or how we educate their children in Torah or secular studies, do we stop and appreciate all the hours that they put in on countless nights? Grading tests, preparing lessons, writing thoughtful feedback on exams and essays, writing assessments, writing letters of recommendation? Or do we take all that these teachers do for granted? Or worse, do we not even see it at all? That's why our Parsha opens, command the children of Israel, for now and for future generations. Those who are doing the tireless work behind the scenes need encouragement. The work is hard. It can feel like taking out the garbage, not like the holy work that it is. There's a reason why some of our most talented people don't devote themselves to the Jewish community, and why we sometimes lose our best rabbis and our best teachers and our best professionals. If all of their effort goes unacknowledged, if all we do is, or if we do not give them the encouragement that they deserve and need, then we should not be surprised if the fire on the altar no longer burns strongly or as brightly. That's the challenge of Partsat Zav. In the preface of Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler's Strive for Truth, the translator, Rav Ari Carmel, writes how the author described arriving in Kelm in the year 1906 as a young boy of 14, and how he was considered too young to be given the much coveted task of sweeping the yeshiva floor. And in his Toldot Hag Simchat Torah, Avraham Ya'ari describes the auctioning of honors that took place on the night of Simchat Torah, which included opening the ark, having aliyot, lifting up the Torah, and amazingly, above all the rest of honors, the privilege of cleaning the shul throughout the year. Imagine such a culture when people realized that cleaning the shul was a privilege and an honor. We remember this Shabbos, Shabbat HaGadol, the great Sabbath, the week before Pesach, that the first primary priority for those serving in the temple was that mundane and necessary task of removing the ashes, so that everything would be perfect in the morning. The Kohanim's work was to ensure that everything would flow so easily and function so perfectly that it can't be taken for granted. Our work is to make sure that we never take it for granted. Thank you, Rabbi Saul Strasberg from Congregation Shereth Israel. And stay tuned for Devar Acher. Rabbi Jamie Krongol. She's the adventure rabbi, and she's the senior rabbi of a venture program based in Boulder, Colorado, and she thinks it's time for an upgrade. Right in the beginning of our portion, Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe, God spoke to Moses, right? The Eternal speaks to Moses. And right there, just 5 words into the Torah portion, and she's already lost. The Eternal spoke to Moses. What are we supposed to do with that? Warning. Bloop, bloop. If you have no difficulty with the concept of God speaking to Moses, or to anyone for that matter, you can do us all a favor and skip to the next Devar Acher, the next essay. You're not going to like this one. And, she and I have no desire to offend you, which, if you keep listening, might happen. Okay, the Torah is our most sacred text. And yet, in chapter after chapter, these 5 challenging words confront us. The Eternal spoke to Moses. Despite our modern interpretations, in verse after verse, the Torah talks about God as if God is a man who has the power to make it rain if we follow the commandments, and if we don't, well, no rain. The Torah comes from a time when people misunderstood the world differently, at least they understood it differently than we do today. They thought that demons caused people to have strokes, that comets were a sign of God's anger, and that infected shopping carts and their handles could spread the common cold. Our understanding of the world has changed. Those things that we used to think God caused, we know that they have nothing to do with God. For example, we used to assume that violating the Sabbath could cause droughts. Now we know that droughts are really the result of climate change. The idea of a biblical God who punishes and rewards us based on our behavior just doesn't fit the world as we experience it anymore. We all know wonderful people who suffer and some pretty nasty people who thrive. So what are we supposed to do about that? When you have an old computer or an old phone or an old operating system, old software, what do? You upgrade. And that's precisely what Jewish thinkers throughout time have done with the idea of God. As they learned more about the world, they upgraded their ideas about God. Practically as soon as someone wrote, "The Eternal spoke to Moses," someone else came along and asked, "What does the Eternal spoke mean?" Unfortunately, not enough Jews are familiar with the variety of available Jewish ways of thinking about God. They still think that the only official Jewish God, and the Jewish God concept, is of a person-like deity who commands us and criticizes us. Many of us do not know that these great thinkers who offered us upgrades of our God ideas include Baruch Spinoza of 17th century Amsterdam, who suggested that we can best experience God through nature, and that God cannot affect the daily workings of the world. Or Martin Buber, a 20th century thinker who suggested that we can experience God through our relationships. Jews often avoid conversations about God or with God by arguing that it's impossible to describe what God is. It might be impossible, and yet it's still important to talk about God, wonder about the nature of the eternal, and to try to wrap our heads around what it means to say the Eternal spoke. If you're still listening and you're not offended, maybe you'd like to learn more about other great Jewish thinkers. Maybe you'll even add your own thoughts to theirs. Then you should think about becoming part of our upgrade for God here at Congregation Micah, and joining us at BLT, both online and in person when it starts to happen. Okay, stay tuned for some Haftarah and probably one more Devar Acher.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'yimim tovim v'ratza b'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo u'v'nbiei ha'emet v'tzedek.
So, normally for Parshat Tzav, we would read from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 7, chapter 8. But the weekly portion there speaks of sacrifices, and the prophet really warns his people not to believe that sacrifices by themselves will please the Almighty, that they actually have to be accompanied by godly deeds. But that portion, really taken from Jeremiah's temple sermon, is not what I'm going to read, because we are also at Shabbat Hagadol, the Great Sabbath, which derives its name from this Haftarah. Now, there are differing opinions about why this Haftarah was chosen. Most say that it's read on the Shabbat before Pesach, the festival of liberation from Egyptian servitude, because it deals with the ultimate liberation of Israel from oppression, which would come about when the, quote, great day, Shabbat Hagadol, arrives, with Elijah as its messenger. Elijah has a long tradition of being connected with Seder observance. Another opinion holds that Pesach actually is the great family festival of the Jewish people, and the concluding words of the Haftarah speak of family unity. There, in fact, are other opinions that Shabbat, the great Shabbat, is because Malachi speaks of the arrival of this great day. We know that the prophet Malachi, my messenger, lived about the middle of the 5th century before the Common Era. Judea is still a Persian province ruled by a governor. The prophet addressed himself to the social and religious conditions of his time, which were not unlike the society we face today. And his critique helped to bring about reforms by Ezra and Nehemiah. So, here we go. Then the offerings of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasing to the Eternal, as they were in days of old, as in years long past. Then I will draw near to you for justice. I myself will be swift to witness against sorcerers, adulterers, and those who swear falsely, those who extort the wages of workers, who oppress widows and orphans, and who thrust aside strangers, all those who do not fear me, says the God of heaven's hosts. For I, the Eternal, have not changed, and thus you, the children of Jacob, have not ceased to be. From the days of your ancestors, you have strayed from my statutes, and you have not observed them. Return to me, and I will return to you, says the God of heaven's hosts. Yet you say, in what way do we need to return? Can anyone cheat God? Yet you do cheat me. And you say, how have we cheated you? In regard to tithes and sacred contributions. You're cursed with a curse. You're cheating me, the whole lot of you. Bring the full tithe to the storehouse, so that there is food for my house. Test me in this, says the God of heaven's hosts. Will I not open heaven's window for you, and pour down you a limitless blessing? I will rebuke the devourer of you, so that it does not destroy the fruit of your soil, nor will the vine in the field be barren for you, says the God of heaven's hosts. All the nations shall count you happy, for you shall be a land of delight, says the God of heaven's hosts. Your words have been harsh against me, says the Eternal, and yet you say, what have we said to one another against you? You have said, it's useless to serve God. What gain is there in observing God's service, or in walking the mourner's attire before the God's heaven's hosts? We account the arrogant happy, the evildoers are the ones who live on. They even try God and get away with it. Then those who revere the Eternal talked to each other. The Eternal listened and took note of it. And a scroll of remembrance was written before God concerning those who revered and valued God's name. On that day I am preparing, says the God of heaven's hosts. They shall be to me my most precious possession. I will be tender to them as parents are tender to their children who serve them. You shall turn back and see the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between the one who serves and one who does not serve. For behold, the day is coming, like an oven, burning, Those who were so proud, who did so much evil, shall be stumbled. The day shall come, will burn them up, leaving them neither root nor branch, says the God of heaven's host. But for you who revere my name, a son of righteousness shall rise with healing on its wings, says S-U-N. You shall break out and gambol like calves, like stall-fed calves. You shall trample the wicked, for they shall be ashes under your feet on the day that I am making, says the God of heaven's host. Remember the Torah of Moses, my servant, the statutes and ordinances I commanded him at Horeb for all Israel. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Eternal, to turn the hearts of parents to their children and the hearts of children to their parents, lest I come and smite the lands with destruction. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet for the coming of the great and terrible day of the Eternal. Terrible could be translated as awesome, just so you know. A final blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim tzadik b'chol hadorot ha'el haneman ha'omer ve'osei hamdaber umkayem shekol devarav emet v'tzedek al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al ha'neviim ve'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha v'limnucha lechavod u'tifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach umvorchim otach yitbarach shimcha b'fi kol chai tamid le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. All right. Don't let the light go out. All right. A perpetual fire. Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky. A fire on the altar must be kept burning within. Keep fire burning constantly on the altar. Do not let it go out. It's from 6:2 and 6:6. In the book of Leviticus. Tzav. Parashat. For many people, the least popular book in the Torah. Its strange rituals like animal sacrifices, its fascination with skin diseases, ritual impurity. Truth is, we rabbis love this book, and you can discover all kinds of poetic, spiritual insights in its details. The commandment in the verse I just mentioned is a great example. It's a requirement to keep stoking the fire within something. What fire is this verse exactly talking about? And what is it burning within? On a simple level, the Torah describes how priests should take care of the sacrificial altar in the ancient tabernacle and later the ancient temple in Jerusalem. There always had to be some kind of sacrifice simmering all the time, with some kind of fuel added regularly, even on Shabbat, when burning fire was otherwise forbidden. On a more poetic level, the commandment to keep the constant fire burning symbolizes how we should nurture our own inner spirits, our passion, our enthusiasms. After all, where does the fire burn? Not on the altar, but within the heart, really, of every person who brings the offering. So, as you may have learned in the past or experienced, life can run you down, or it can get you down. It can disappoint you. It can frustrate you. Sometimes you may want to give up. Things are tough, especially lately, now that we can't be together. Sometimes you may find things particularly boring or unimportant. You should always know that you have a fire within your heart. You've got enough emotional depth, empathy for other people, moral courage. You have the wisdom to discover what is meaningful and beautiful in the world, and the capacity to be sensitive to God's presence. You're a spirit, not just a body. And all those precious qualities require protection. If you want the fire to keep burning, you have to tend to it. You got to restock it. You got to fuel it. You got to stoke it, right? You have to devote time to your spiritual practices, your activities like prayer and study. You have to do good deeds that connect you to others and build your enthusiasm for more ethical action. And you have to pay attention not only to the physical dimension of your life, but also to the spiritual dimension, the fire within. And when you start to feel the fire going out, that's when you got to add the fuel. The Zohar, the central work of Jewish mysticism written in the 13th century of Spain, offers a wonderful teaching about the fire within us. Let's paraphrase it. It says, a wise person should open their eyes and see a flame burning above his or her head and realize that the flame needs fuel, that the human body is a wick, and that divine presence is the flame. What's the fuel? Fuel is the good deeds. So keep the fire burning. And the last thought of the week here on Shabbos morning, before I hope you go and, I don't know, take a nap or tend to your soul, comes from the last verses of the Torah portion I read for you, Vayomer Moshe el Aharon ve'el banav. It's Moses now saying to Aaron and to his sons that they are to boil flesh at the entrance of the tent of meeting and eat it there with the bread that is in the basket of ordination. And Aaron and his sons shall eat it, and what is left over, the flesh of the bread, you shall consume fire. You shall not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting for 7 days, until the day that your period of ordination is completed. Ordination will completeness require 7 days. Everything done today, the Lord has commanded to be done 7 days to make expiation for you. You shall remain at the entrance of the tent of meeting day and night for 7 days, keeping the Lord's charge, that you may not die. For so I have been commanded. And Aaron and his sons did all the things that the Lord commanded through Moses. So remain in your tent of meeting, but keep meeting us in our tent virtually. And have a good Shabbos. All right? We miss you. We love you. Congregation Micah thanks you. Shabbat Shalom.